Thank you so much for taking the time out to meet me.
I mean, I've been waiting for this.
Absolutely. I think it's been a long time coming. I'm really glad we finally got to meet. So I guess before I've asked this question to all the people I've interviewed, I guess one important question that to me is how you ended up in philosophy before we even delve into the root of the issue. Of all the things in Nigeria, to be particular.
Okay, so it began as a very funny kind of thing. Secondary school, it was just one kind of arbitrary thing. I just sat with 5 of my friends in the class. We had our jam form in front of us. And then we were looking up and asking ourselves, so what are we going to do into the university to go and do? I mean, so we started looking at the brochure, and then we said, okay, why don't we just do English? You know, somebody said, no, let's do English and literary studies. Okay, that sounds better. Okay, so, and then we started searching, and then, okay, we have English and literary study at Abuja, University of Abuja. Okay, let's fill University of Abuja. So we just filled it. And so that tells you that it wasn't as if I had a particular endeavor in mind that I wanted to do, but it was clear to me from secondary school that I love books. I read tons and tons of Pacesetter series, of Marys and Bones, James Hadley Chase, and then gradually I started developing this love for, teaching, converting those things that I have read into some kind of knowledge bites that I can dissipate to people and so on. So eventually I sat for JAMB with English. Yeah. I came here and I was told that my combination is not good for English, but that they will see what they are going to do. Eventually, I was given philosophy. So my experience is also the experience of most students of philosophy. I call us accidental students. Students who could not get into law, students who could not get into some other courses, but who come to philosophy. The difference about my own is that I eventually fell in love with philosophy. By the time I got to, I had it very tough in 100 level because I had to confront my dad. Who would say, so what is philosophy? And I was saying, actually, I think I gave him one funny answer one day. I said, philosophers are people who think. And then he stared at me and said, you're going to go to the university to learn how to think for 4 years? And from that day, I stopped going to him. I mean, because I know anytime he sees me, what is this philosophy you are going? So that was how I found myself, and I've not looked back since I came. I mean, yeah, you may call this a sentiment, but I think there is nothing like philosophy. I mean, it is not just a discipline, it is just a way of life. It is something that invades your entire being and turn your perspective around.
Why in all of the topics to study in the field of philosophy that you are studying, why did you choose postmodernism as one of them?
Okay, that's a very good question. Again, going back to, I was trained by a whole lot of wonderful teachers. I mean, teachers who come from a whole variety of perspectives, especially perspectives that have been modified by the African condition. Okay, and so. When I was here in the 90s, the department was a ferment of ideas from different perspectives. There were those then who believed that there wasn't anything called African philosophy, that philosophy is just philosophy. It's a universal discipline, and there's nothing you can say about a particular African dimension about it, okay? But I know that I had 2 prominent teachers. Professor Dipo Irele, Professor Olusegun Oladipo. So I know Professor Irele will come to class and will tell us we mention Michel Foucault. Have you read Foucault's Madness and Civilization? And then, we are just looking at, him. Have you heard of postmodernism? Have you heard of Anthony Appiah? What about Jacques Derrida? And all of us are just, but I was a very timid guy then. I can count the number of times I answer questions in class from 100 level to 400 level. But I know that one thing I do, once a class ends, I'm headed for the Kennedy Library. Okay? And then I'm always looking for books. Anything that mentions philosophy is easy game, fair game for me, and I was always so I got my understanding, my introduction to postmodern thoughts from Professor Irele. But interesting dimension of it that eventually pulled me into, a deeper attempt to understand what it all boils down to was this kind of rivalry then between Professor Irele and Professor Ladipo, okay, in the same department. So Professor Ladipo was teaching us contemporary issues in African philosophy, founder level. So he would come to class, and then he would say, well, some people would just go about, banding postmodern terms and so on, all about. And he was the first one that posed that question. How is it possible that a continent that is struggling to be modern will now begin to deploy postmodern term? In what sense can a continent be postmodern when it is still struggling to be a modern continent? When everything that points to modernity is still arrested, within the continent. And that struck me. So one of those essays that I have on postmodernism, I had to begin with that anecdotal point, to just put the debate in context. Yeah, so that is eventually what led me to that. So in the West, scholars are already talking about the end of postmodernism. They're already talking about how useless a concept like that is. How somebody like Abiola Ilele will say it is one of the most insidious kind of idea or concept that could ever have been introduced into the African continent or African scholarship and so on. But I am always wary of wholesale rejection of ideas. We live in a world where you have several kinds of ideas. The same way people have rejected postmodernism, people have also rejected Marxism. But it seems to me that the rejection of those terms are based on some serious fundamental mistakes, okay? And the question for me as a scholar is to look behind these ideas. In the first place, how did they develop? What is the trajectory, the dynamics that led to people thinking about the postmodern in the first place? And what are the things that enabled it to, take over the mind of those brilliant scholars that we call postmodernists? Richard Rorty, Jacques Derrida, Michel Foucault, and the rest of them. And what was it about those things that can be rescued, that will not easily die, okay? And what can we do with those ideas? So that was the high point for me, and I began to look at what postmodernism is and what those people are talking about.
What is it?
So the first brick wall you face when you ask that question is, people prefer to talk about what it is not, and people prefer to look. Okay, so postmodernism began first as a term, a concept in architecture. It is an attempt to look at, the Gothic kind of building in Germany and so on, and to say, no, this lacks aesthetic appeal. Okay, so why don't we begin to build something that is not that? Why don't we just introduce some kind of funny ideas, for instance, that take from here, and then you put it together in some kind of mosaic or collage that is so beautiful and so on. And so imagine what I'm talking about now. An idea made its entry in architecture, and then it has won its way into literature, into philosophy, into cultural studies. So there must be something about that idea that can be engaged. And so that is my word. That is the perspective from which I have been engaging postmodernism and so on. Not from the perspective of, this is a Western idea, and African scholars should be careful about Western ideas, and let's just leave their Western idea and let us develop our own kind of ideas. Yeah.
So So now let's get into the meat of the
Yeah.
issue of the postmodernism in African philosophy.
Okay.
Now, so understanding this, there was an idea that you sort of explored briefly in your essay. It's sort of the idea of colonialism as a modernity, as a
Okay.
This thing, as sort of preempting modernity for
Okay.
Africa, and sort of seeing postmodernism as sort of like this same, having that same sentiment with post-colonialism.
Oh yeah. So the first essay I wrote is titled Beyond Postmodernism. Now, that title could be trickish because it was an attempt for me to combat or engage or interrogate a particular scholar that I respect, one of my senior colleagues here who left some time ago, Sonia Osha. And in his book, he was trying to engage with the work of Kwasi Wiredu. Kwasi Wiredu is one of the topmost African philosophers, from a Ghanaian philosopher, and he was making claims in that book, claims that number one were not in tune with his own postmodern, post-structuralist ideas. So, in retrospect, I could say that what I intended to do in that essay was to point out or to use the Derridian and to deconstruct Sonia's own position, okay, within that essay by saying, yes, this is what you have said, but if you follow the base, the perspective, the post-structural, postmodernist perspective that you are coming from, you will discover that you are actually not making any case, okay? That you are trying to pull this person who has not taken any bow to postmodernism, and you are trying to hit him over the head with postmodern issues and postmodern terms, okay? But it was after that study that I began to think deeper. Now, okay, if this is the ensemble of ideas that postmodernism is, isn't there something to be made out of it? So this is my starting query. I asked myself, and scholars have also asked that question, is postmodernism to be taken just as a period term or as some kind of mood in modernism itself or in modernity? So it depends on the kind. So if you take it as a period, then you begin to have issues. So that takes me back to those two people, Oladipo and Irele. I think then Oladipo was engaging with postmodernism as a period term. Okay? And the argument he made is that we have barely exhausted modernity. We cannot begin to talk of the post as something that comes after, But if you engage with postmodernism as a particular strategic, critical mood that came out of modernity itself and its condition and its discontents, then you can better place postmodernism itself. Yeah. So it is modernist reacting to the lost hopes, lost vision of modernity. I mean, you read somebody like Jürgen Habermas, okay, and you begin to see something like the unfinished business of modernity, okay, that during the Enlightenment we had very significant noble virtues, okay, of progress, of development, of enlightenment, and so on. But by the time Hitler invaded Europe, by the time the Holocaust began to happen, Hitler looking for the final solution to the Jewish question, and the horror of 6 million dead among the Jews, then you discover that something had happened to that Enlightenment idea. But Habermas's idea is that, or argument is that, because of all those terrible, tragic happenings, we cannot say that modernity has ended. We cannot therefore proclaim the postmodern. Yes. Okay? Aha. Another central thing to modernity is the challenge to what is called meta-narratives. That, you have the meta-narrative of God, you have the meta-narrative of the proletarian, You have all those big terms, you know, that are meant to serve as universal signifiers. According to them, you cannot have something that covers all contexts and all situations. Now, it is at that point of critique, of breaking down the meta-narrative, that I began to find something that could be deployed within the African context. And that was why I wrote that second essay, We Are All Postmodernists Now, you know, trying to see how we can bring some of the critical elements, the constructionist elements in postmodernism within the African post-colonial agenda. So that was my own entry point, okay, and into that debate. And I think, with all sense of modesty, that I think I succeeded with arguments, okay, because you read so many arguments and you see African philosophers deploying postmodern strategies, you know, and the major concept is the concept of Eurocentrism. So look at majority of African philosophers' essays and books, and you will see, starting from Sheikh Anta Diop, you know, down to Leopold Sedar Senghor and the rest of them, you see an attempt to invade that concept and to begin to break it down. Senghor has been crucified on so many occasions for saying that reason is white and emotion is black. Okay, trying to bring two kind of rationality to bear on the way we look at, you know, the blacks and the whites and their relationship together. But if you look at it, he was essentially trying to say that you cannot take rationality as a concept and make it a universal one. Because it is within that universal context that Africa were, with slavery and colonialism, that we were marginalized, that we were oppressed. Colonialism was only possible because Africans were excluded from the parameters of reason and rationality, okay? For Hegel, of course you have heard of it, Hegel says that the absolute spirit in his march to self-realization from the Orient down to Prussia bypassed Africa. And so we were left in some kind of primitive infantilism, and, you know, we were not able to, we lack the concept of God, of society, of development, and of culture. Okay, so how do we begin to recuperate all this? Okay, I found it very instructive that within postmodernism, we could talk of the plurality of rationality, we could talk of the plurality of reason, we could talk of you know, the breaking down of meta-narratives in a way that, why not falling into a relativistic world, we can still claim some kind of rationality and agency for ourselves. So, in what sense do postmodernists enable African philosophers to reclaim their agency in the face of colonialism, in the face of... So, that is the question that I have been grappling with, okay? And to again return to that question, there are multiple dimensions to it. Colonialism accelerated modernity in Africa. Yeah. Of course, Olufemi Taiwo will reject that claim, and but facilitated it. And so, on one other side, you now want to begin to see if colonialism has some kind of funny relationship to modernity. In what sense, therefore, can we now bring post-colonialism in a very significant, critical relationship with postmodernism? So, within that question, you can begin to see where I've been trying to insert myself, my research agenda. Yeah.
It's sort of the argument that what's his name put forward, Anthony Appiah.
Appiah, yes.
Is the post
yes.
in postmodernism, same as the post in post-colonialism, and it's a very strong argument.
Yeah. Yes.
It's sort of staying along those lines, but along the line of your essay, there's something that you mentioned that was very important, that was very critical to my thinking. It's particularly the idea of the the different modernities. No, this is not that we are all modernists, but the
Uh-huh.
other one we spoke
Okay.
of different modernities. Right?
Okay.
We spoke of the functional modernity,
Okay.
the cultural modernity.
Okay,
and
cultural
modernity.
yes.
But basically, you spoke of 3 different modernities.
Yes.
And there was one in particular, I can't remember which, but basically it was the modernity where we built from the pre-colonial.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's sort of that idea of, well, and you sort of raised this thought of combining this pre-colonial, drawing this
yes,
from that pre-colonial, and sort of combining it with and sort of using that to face the
as a kind of foundation on which our modern existence
and then
could be built.
Putting that side to side with this Western modernity and seeing which one.
But
then there was a question that came across my mind. Is because if we are going to be modern, then wouldn't it be hard for us to say, because that part is so underdeveloped, the research and the strength of that area is so underdeveloped. But how do you raise that pre-colonial modernity which we should build off of, and combine it with this and use that to face against the strength of this that is still the dawn right now?
Okay, let me pick up from the last point. So with slavery, with the immense output of Western intellectuals and philosophers, Eurocentrism was raised into the capacity of a universal, So there is this funny, subtle, equation of Westernization of Eurocentrism with universality. In other words, what is universal is what developed from the West. Okay? So, but then, part of the challenge of the agenda, research agenda of most African philosophers is to see how we can break down, universalism. How we can.
The point of it.
The point of.
They say they want to create reliable knowledge. Like that's the point of the West's creation of knowledge and all that kind of stuff. And the Enlightenment was to create a reliable form of knowledge that was independent.
But you know that there is no knowledge that is devoid of its context. If you have a knowledge develops from within the particular context, such that if I take a particular knowledge that develops there, and I try to introduce it into a different context, then you have a whole lot of problem. I can cite several instances. The United States killed Muammar Gaddafi because of this funny universalist pretension of importing democracy into Libya. Now, we have Libya now, totally broken down. Okay? This concept of the state made its march from the West into Africa. Okay? And if you read the literature, you see all manner of caricatures and anomaly, that has attended the coming of the modern state, within Africa. Okay, so you have all those things. In fact, there's something Peter Eke called migrated structures. Structures that left their host country, host context, and they left the values that attended their origin there. But they just came in the form of bare structures, and they are imposed upon a different context, a different environment. You can only have something very terrible. Okay? In fact, the problem, according to Peter Eke, I think the title of that is Colonialism and Social Structures in Africa. The problem that post-colonial that Africa faces with the post-colonial existence is that we now have so many structures that could not find their feet on the African continent. So the point is, as long as you begin to push universality, okay, you begin to have problem. And it is to the credit of African philosophers that they saw the illusion behind what the West called universality, right from the beginning. Okay, so it is also the attempt to challenge that went into this call for multiple modernism or multiple modernities. And that is very interesting. Again, the point for the West is to say that everything that is called modern emanated from the West. In history, you will see that again through the intellectuals and the scholars, that the West took over the heritage, the cultural philosophical heritage of ancient Greece. Do you get the point? Yeah. And so there is that kind of trajectory for them that originated in ancient Greece with Aristotle and Euripides and Sophocles and the rest of them, and then came right down to the Renaissance period and Enlightenment, Kant and the rest, and then down up to the modern period. Yeah. Okay, so that is what they push as universalism. But the issue is an attempt to now begin to contest that universalism. So that is what went into multiple modernity. Multiple modernity is grounded in what is called global history. Now, that is a very interesting field. Global history attempts to tell us that any particular idea has multiple origins all over the world. What you call the gun now, gunpowder came from China, not from UK. Do you understand? Yes. So you have what you call the modern or modernity itself has several originating points across the universe. We cannot say it originated from England. We cannot say it originated from America. It originated from several areas. Issue of textile that comes from India, issue of gunpowder from, even in terms of concept, what you call English language. It's just a potpourri of Latin and Old English and German and Scandinavian issue and all those things. So it is from that perspective that the issue of breaking the stranglehold of modernity, saying modernity, in fact, a recent essay is modernity universal and singular. Okay, that is the concept. That is the title. Is it singular? Is it universal? And in that, I rejected multiple, and I went for multilateral.